Want to learn what's new with dental products and services? Come join us. Welcome, everybody, to the Digital Trade Show Dental Podcast, where I am sitting down with the amazing people in the industry and having them talk about their companies, their products, their why, their outlook on the future, all kinds of exciting things, and maybe even some things about them that you didn't know. I'm your host, John Stamper, and thanks for joining me. This episode of the Digital Trade Show Dental Podcast is brought to you by TSYS, one of the nation's leading providers of payment processing services. Whether you need a secure payment gateway, an easier way to set up payment plans for those patients that want to get the dentistry done but don't always have the funds up front, or a time-saving system to automatically post your credit card payments to your practice management software system at the end of the day, they have it. So it's one thing for me to come on here and list all the things that they do. It's a whole other thing to meet them in person and see it in action. So that's what I did. Got in the car, drove down to Charlotte, North Carolina. I got to spend a couple of days with their leadership team, all of their members that are speaking with dental practices all over the country. I got to listen in on some of the phone calls on some of the things that the dental practices need and really watch how they handle that whole situation. I was really impressed by their vision, but most importantly, how they have taken payment processing and humanized it. So I really encourage you to go check them out and learn more about some of the innovative solutions they are providing in this space. And right now, I'm really excited that for all of my listeners, they're making available a $300 activation credit to anybody that signs up for their service. Now, this is the equivalent to the cost of the machine for an entire year. One of the things that I also was impressed with is that how many times have you been using a practice management software system and you were using your merchant processing with that, and then you had to switch and you had to use the merchant processing system that came with that practice management software. Doesn't work like that with TSYS, and I think that's what's awesome is they're very, very flexible, and they've built their systems to be able to plug and play with whatever it is that you have in your practice. Another great thing, no contracts. So if you want to take advantage of this awesome activation credit that they're making available, just call 844-545-6255. That's 844-545-6255. They've got a great team there answering questions from dental practices all over the country. Go ahead and let them know that you heard about them on John Stamper's Digital Trade Show Dental Podcast, and they will be sure to answer any questions you have specifically about your payment processing and any and all the needs that you have around that very important part of your business. Be sure to mention the activation credit. And once again, the phone number is 844-545-6255. What's going on, everybody? Happy 2019 and welcome to the Digital Trade Show Dental Podcast. I am very excited as I look out towards the first part of this year to bring to you this podcast series in conjunction with Dental Consultant Connection. So towards the end of last year, I got the wonderful opportunity. I was introduced to Robin Morrison, who started Dental Consultant Connection, and we got talking and was learning more about her company and what she does. And it was very fascinating to me that there would be an organization that had pulled together coaches and consultants, all with their own unique expertise and focus, and then have them there and available based on the needs of a dental practice. I love the idea. As so many of you know, the decision to bring somebody into your practice, regardless of what they do, can be a very overwhelming decision. There's a lot of things to think about, and not one person knows anything and everything. And so certainly having the ability to be able to have focused experts in specific needs of your practice really is a cool idea. And so I thought that it would be helpful to bring on each one of the team members from DCC on a weekly basis. And so Robin and I talked about this, and we thought we'd put together a podcast series to get the year started. And the theme is practice strategies for the startup and the season. So what we're going to do is each week we're going to have one of her team members come on. We're going to start with having them come on the DentalCast Productions Facebook page on the I've Got 10 video podcast and have them just share 10 minutes worth of a a couple of tips for the startup practice and or the seasoned practice. And then we'll have them come here on the Digital Trade Show Dental Audio Podcast and have them share a little bit more about themselves, their story. As many of you know, that is something I'm very, very passionate about. I love people's stories. I think it is the one thing sometimes that is the difference between any consumer making a decision on what they choose to purchase, is knowing a little bit more about that person. And certainly if we can do that and we can showcase so many of the great personalities and people in dentistry and have them come on and share their story, it makes it a little bit easier when it comes to making that decision on the product or service that you want to purchase. So I am very excited, as we said, to get this thing started. Robin was very gracious to have one of her team members come on once a week, and we're looking forward to where this goes, but more importantly, providing great content for you, the dental professional, that you can take a couple tips here, a couple tips there, apply in your practice, but more importantly, if you want to take advantage of some of these great resources that Robin has available and the people that she's working with at DCC, would love to have you reach out to dentalconsultantconnection.com. Learn more about them, learn more about the great consultants, and I will certainly do my best here on a weekly basis to showcase their talents, learn more about their stories, and most importantly, always try to provide great content for you as you listen in your busy schedule. So, without a further ado, here is this week's episode, Practice Strategies for the Startup and the Seasoned. All right, everybody, we're going to hop right in here on our next episode on the Digital Trade Show Dental Podcast. Very excited to be with you today. And this is the continuation of our podcast series with Robin Morrison's Dental Consultant Connection. And it's been awesome each week, been able to bring on one of her team members and have them share their unique specialty on how they're helping dental practices. And the more I go through this, the more I'm realizing, I knew this at the beginning when Robin and I talked about this kind of towards the end of last year, just how amazing this team is that she's put together and the value that really DCC is to the industry. So it's a true honor to be able to bring this to all of you and share with you the great work that Robin is doing with her team. And this morning, I have with me Kristine Berry. Just a tiny little bit. Kristine's going to share her story and kind of how she got to where she is, but just wanted to share just a little bit. I mean, her career went from dental hygienist to board examiner and educational manager for a global Fortune 500 company to practice management consultant and an industry leader in business development. So she provides C-suite and business advisory services to dental groups and single offices that are seeking to transform their operations. They want to grow. Certainly, looking to deliver results through just making great decisions and taking action. So she really thrives with helping those practices boost their revenue, streamlining their operations, team development, leading by key performance indicators, things like that. And she's widely respected and recognized for her ability to drive profitability and maximize the organizational's value. Kristine, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for that introduction. Jeez,
well,
good. I can set up straight.
Yeah, it's important. It's interesting. I mean, obviously, we're going to get into kind of the meat and bones of this and have you share a couple tips on how you can help practices. I just, over the years, and you can appreciate this, the longer you're in dentistry, you look back and there's just so much great things that people have accomplished. And I think, starting as a hygienist and the decision for you to obviously branch out and continue to help beyond that is always very impressive. And so I thought it was important to share. So, but would love to have you, as we kind of get started, talk a little bit about your story, how you got to starting as a hygienist and how it's landed you to what you're doing right now.
Absolutely. So it really kind of a full circle, even with what Robin's putting together, as far as having the consultants together. My career started with friends, and it started with people introducing me to someone, and then that person introduced me to someone else, and it just kind of went on. When I really look back, and I mentioned this before, that dentistry is such a relationship-based profession, not only between us and our patients, but if you want to just loop it all together, even on the corporate side, right? Or on the side that we're on, that we're providing services to providers. So I actually started out as a dental assistant, and I was a preceptorship trained dental assistant and worked in the dental practice that my sister worked in, and she was a dental hygienist. And so she brought me in because I was one of those young people graduating high school and didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I started working in that practice, and I really enjoyed it. That aspect of dental assisting, I tell you, any dental assistant who's listening, I couldn't handle it. And I say that with all honesty. I kept on rolling over his foot. I mean, we're talking back in the 80s. So I was not able to really partner with my doctor in a way that I've seen such great partnerships now. So then I decided, well, I saw my sister and she kind of worked on her own. And I said, well, maybe I think I can handle that. Maybe I won't hurt anyone if I just work on my own. So I went back to hygiene school. And from there, I graduated, and it was really got involved with my professional association. It's all groups, right? It's staying in the community. I have a belief that we cannot become ourselves by ourselves. And so often we wanted to hunker down and put our heads down and try to get through something. But it was joining the professional association, the hygiene association, working clinically. And like I said, then I was out at a dental convention, and one of my colleagues over in California, she introduced me to someone who worked at Oral-B at the time. So those of you who've been around enough to remember Oral-B, California Oral-B, as a sales rep. And then I met the VP of sales, and I had some interviews, and I started doing that. And then from then it's just, keep the business cards and keep an Excel spreadsheet of everyone you meet, because you never know where your path is going to be, continuing on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, and especially it seems like it's a larger industry, right? I mean, it's a lot of times people will bump it up against medical and say that we're a little bit more cottage, and certainly smaller in numbers.
Well, it's $1 billion cottage industry, I think.
Pretty big cottage, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, then how about talk about, I guess, this desire, to move forward and to really want to help dental practices.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love dental hygiene, and working one-on-one with patients was a thrill. And I still twitch when I see pictures right now of, people with calculus or the oral systemic connection conversations and all those wonderful, juicy things that hygienists and the dental profession is moving into. And I just got to a point where I wanted to expand and kind of influence one to many. And by doing that, I went back to school, got my business degree in organizational development, and then eventually my master's degree in executive coaching. And in that, it's not many people have a master's degree. In fact, there's a very limited amount of people who actually have that in executive coaching. So I do want to toot my own horn, especially from a dental professional side. And that's the beauty of that, though, John. It combines the art and science of coaching, just like dental hygiene combines the art and science. So when I kind of got that bug about we can achieve so much more through other people, right? So I want to stand for my clients. And if you say you want this, I'll do anything that I can do to help support you, but I can't do it for you. And so I think that's kind of one of the ways that I really enjoyed when I see that spark in someone's eyes, that, and it could be a pain spark, that they're in pain for some reason. But I said, if you really are committed to this, let's just kind of make some magic happen. So it's just kind of evolved that way. A lot of it's just saying yes to a lot of things, and, brought me to a couple of different states, and, I have two wonderful kids in the meantime who are amazing right now. They're young adults. And so it's been a great journey.
Yeah, I love that. All right, so let's get into some of your thoughts. I know we were talking about this on the video podcast over on Dental Cast Productions, but we talked a little bit about retention and certainly the marketplace where it is right now. And I know you shared with everybody 5 key points. Certainly, each one of these, there's tons more detail that you could get into specifically for the practices, but at least for the sake of today's podcast, we wanted to go a little high level and just have you share some of these 5 areas for these practices to really think about when it comes to retention and recruiting and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of your questions when how I got started, what I hadn't realized then at 17 years old, that I was actually working for a very aggressive doctor. And when I was chair side, he would throw forceps if he got frustrated. He, swore like crazy. And he, in that environment, as a 17-year-old, I thought that's what the work environment was, right? So I didn't realize there could be a better way. And so throughout the years, when I realized that when I come across aggressive people in dentistry, and since I had my coaching degree, I really wanted to dive into that research and what is it about them that they're so angry and they have this bullyish type behavior. And there's definitely a distinction. So there's like this civil conflict that is, you may have differing opinions than someone else in your office, or your opinion may be a little bit unpopular because perhaps you have to not give raises, for this year because you don't have the cash flow and you didn't hit your goals. That type of civil conflict between people is always going to happen. And that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. Now, do we need, a lot of us, and I'll throw myself in there as well, need some finessing and skills in how to have those critical conversations? Absolutely. But what I'm really looking at is the abrasive behavior that affects the functioning of an organization. That it goes beyond just a personality conflict. It interrupts and it causes so much distress that I find the dental practices, or particularly the managers or the operational leaders, are spending more time about this problem employee or this situation than they're actually focusing on business at hand. And that can go through, to mild irritation to moderate to severe. I mean, from shouting, right? So people can shouting or swearing or name calling and over control and under control. These are all habits that you could have that someone exhibits aggressive leadership or aggressive behavior. Even in some certain situations over too much sarcasm or public humiliation, right? Or making threats. And one of my favorites was like throwing objects or even feedback from officers, he hit it, he hit the wall before he went out the door. I mean, those type of behaviors are cause for intimidation, and they can affect the practice's growth. And anyone can research, but what we're looking at in dentistry now, which as it relates to is staff turnover and the cost that it has to an organization, that when they can't keep a person in that position, whether that person has been trained or not. And then it's also absenteeism, and it's a low key type of sign that your employees may not want to be there, right? If they're calling in sick all the time, that there may be something else going on. So cost to the practice, I'll just do some quick ones. I'll wrap it back up as far as that one. So high turnover rate, attrition of the valued employees, that people that you really wanted to have and stay there contribute, decreased morale, decreased motivation, and that's going to result in lower productivity and lower efficiency. Perhaps it's the owner is doing way too much and he or she can't delegate because they don't know who to delegate to. There's going to be a higher incidence of stress-related illness. We know that in dentistry anyways. And that even could relate to, mental illness as well as substance abuse. Then again, I mentioned the absenteeism, if people are using their maximum, if not more, their sick days. And then in the worst case scenario, legal action. Because it is a hostile environment. And so some offices do have had to deal with that. And now, if the person doesn't want to go through the legal means, what are they going to, right? They're going to social media. So, and it's the retaliation on those platforms about this doctor or that doctor, or if you confronted, if a patient has a bad experience, we all know about those reviews, right? So it shows up in no subtle ways. And that's what I was mentioning before, that those are the themes that you need to take a step back and take a look at. And then if you're too emotionally involved because it is your baby, because it is your practice, that's why consultants can kind of come in and give you a different view of that.
Right. Yeah, I think it's important that you bring that up. It is the acceptance of another set of eyes, right? Or somebody that can help you with your blind spots. I mean, that's one of the things I know I learned a long time ago, is that somebody has to accept the fact that they have blind spots, just like a car, before we can recognize that the value of having somebody come in and help us see some of those things that we can't see is crucial. And especially, when I think about dental practices, Kristine, I think about the busyness and the serving patients and the people really wanting to do a good job. You can see how it happens, right? You can see how people get busy. They got their head down. They come in every day. They got a schedule to take care of people. It happens, right? I mean, it's one of those things. But to your point, a little incident here, a little incident there can certainly grow into something else. And then before you know it, becomes very large and could cause a lot of problems.
Right. And especially since if the perpetrator or the person who does have that doesn't acknowledge it. Believe me, I am not the most cool, calm, and collected all the time. So, but when I do freak out or may I attack someone verbally or whatever the situation may be, I hope now, you're right, I have enough self-awareness that I will go back and say, oh my gosh, I apologize for that, right? And let's talk through that. That's not necessarily what I'm talking about. It's the constant repeat type of aggressive behavior because I always get confused whether it's an analogy or a metaphor, but they're swimming in their own pool. So they don't even realize that they're doing it or that because I get feedback like, oh, well, they're just sensitive. They're just sensitive. And I said, well, that's their perception of your behavior. So if you want to keep this employee, then you may want to look at that and see how you can do, what perhaps you need to change that perception. I'm not saying, you know what I mean? So it's all the perception of the behavior and how it affects that person. And again, like we mentioned earlier, these aggressive types, they're not evil, they're not crazy, but they just have a lot of, based on the research, have a deep need to be perceived as competent or even super competent. And anything that threatens their competence, they just want to protect. And they just either, they're going to fight or they're going to flight. And that's just basic. I mean, we know that behavior is as far as, we can see that behavior in the wild. We have those instincts for forever. And human beings, we still have that fight or flight instinct, but we also have a brain. And that's what's the amazing, that we can decipher emotionally what's appropriate behavior and what's not. But some people haven't been trained and some people haven't been exposed to it. If you grew up in an aggressive environment for your family life, you just think that's what it is. And I grew up in a very, very sarcastic environment. And I remember bringing it to one of my workplaces when I was working clinically. And, the doctor, and I'm very thankful for him. He sat me down. He said, you know what, that behavior, your sarcasm, I know you're even nervous or this is what you're using, but it's coming off as being disrespectful and your team members are not appreciating that. And I was very aware of that. And I probably didn't appreciate it then, but looking back, it was amazing. That's all I'm talking about. He brought that to my attention.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I know one of the things that we talked about, and we got into a little detail here, was these 5 areas. If you could, hit on those. I know, culture was certainly one of them. And then there were some other ones that I thought were really interesting that you brought up when it comes to retention and people and that in the practice or whatever. So we'd love to have you share.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I did start off with culture, and that can be basically looking at and identifying what is your secret sauce for your particular location, for your particular practice. And so looking at patient surveys or surveying patients and not being afraid to ask patients, why do you come here? What makes you, what makes us special? And being genuine, not just because you want to create some type of new marketing, scheme, right? So, and then ask your current employees. And this is where this is a fun dance as a consultant, because when I do initiate employee surveys, there's a lot of information that comes back to me because it's very confidential, and I won't share with the owner who said what. I share themes, right? Look at the themes. Look at what we can perhaps change. And when it really comes down to it, most of the people in the practices know where their weaknesses are in the practice, right? And know what the strengths are of the practices. But sometimes the doctors or the owners of the locations don't want to listen to their current employees. So, but they have that knowledge, or let me be fair. Let me make sure I'm specific with my words. They may listen, but they may not know what the next step or what to do with that knowledge. And then also an area of, finding out where your sour milk is, right? Finding out from past employees. Let's ask, why did you really leave? Why are you leaving? And then your past patients. And again, depending on what the community is and what the makeup of the practice, you may not feel comfortable doing that yourself. So you can bring someone else in, a third party in to find that and collect that type of information. So from there, you can really have that self-awareness, taking some blinders off, and then looking at what is the culture of your practice. And do you have a written mission statement? Do you have a written why we're doing what we're doing? And when I mentioned before with research with millennials and the younger generations, a lot of it, they want the why. And they want to feel like they're giving back, that they have a give back in their work that they're doing. And it's not always intrinsic. And sometimes they have to adapt someone else's until they can evolve their own, right? So depending on how old they are. And so finding out what your mission statement is for you as a leader and owner, then departmentally, from your hygiene and your administrative and the dental assistants and come together and talk about it. And then if you have multiple locations, is it the same in all locations? And that in itself is fun, just making sure that each one of your practices has that vision and mission that you want them to have. And that kind of goes into number 2, which is having them own it. Own it and believe in it. And that is a great way to kind of weed out employees who may not be a fit. And that's great. If they want to graduate somewhere else and go somewhere else to be employed, then they're going to flourish somewhere else, because we do know that the research tells us that generally there are 3 orientations of the worker. There's someone who has a mentality of it's just a job and it's a paycheck. There's a mentality of it's a career, and they want to do well and they really take pride. And there's an orientation that it's a calling and they love it and they're evangelists. And we can probably, when I say those 3 different categories, we can think of providers that fall into each one of them that we know. And not all of us are going to be at the same orientation, at the same part of our career. So being aware of that for a practice is also important. And then the third one I was going into, 3rd and 4th, would be, performance. And do you have, and most offices do, a standard of performance? I expect my hygienist to do A, B, C, and D, whether that's your duties list or a checklist or your job description or, SOP, standard operating procedure manual, and holding them accountable to that type of behavior or that type of performance on the technical side, on the clinical side. But where I don't often see is a code of conduct, right? Do you have that? Do you have the expectation of this is how we should behave from a civility standpoint? And again, you can't make assumptions that everyone knows that, because everyone comes from different backgrounds. And both of it is holding people accountable, which is what a lot of the consultants can help the owners, help the, divisional managers do, help hold these team members accountable to the metrics and the knowledge, skills, and abilities that they want them to perform in that particular office. And jump in any time, because I can go on. I'm excited.
Yeah, I love listening to this, and I think it's important. It's important stuff. I think the one piece on the conduct side, I know we talked about this briefly, is that we do focus a lot on the performance metrics, like you said, which are super important. But so often people don't focus on the conduct metrics, right? Like really assessing what that looks like in the practice and are people behaving. And you used something on the video podcast that I thought was great, which was very simple, which is, are you being nice, right? I mean, it's I don't know how much science is out there or study or research that people like to work with people that are nice, right? People like to do business with people that are nice. People like to probably get treatment plans done that could be expensive, that maybe they don't always have the money to afford when the practice is nice. And so, I mean, certainly I know there's a fine line between being nice and being honest with them and open with them, where they have to go. But you know what I'm saying? I just think the whole conduct metric piece is very interesting and very important.
It's funny. So two things I want to touch base on that. I want to also make sure that we, from a team environment, right? So from a team development environment, and this is why the owning part, do we all have the same definition of nice?
Right.
Right. I mean, back in the day when we were talking about, 5-star service for dental practices and, what's that theme? That's a hotel. I'm drawing it now, but there was so many correlations to having, Nordstrom service and all these things like that, that they were trying to get, with the AACD and high-end dentistry, back in the 15 years ago and being involved with that. Well, the key was, do all your team members have the same understanding of what service is? And so that's part of the training, right? That's part of the going back to the scalable systems that you need to kind of get up underneath what's the culture about. Because we can say be nice, but my definition of nice may be different, like you said, than your definition of nice. And I would not want a team member to consider, I was really nice to Mrs. Jones and I didn't let her know that, she had gum disease and that she needs scaling and root planing because I was just, I know that she's going through a lot. Well, that's not really being nice. That's not really doing your job, or that's kind of stepping into sympathy too much, not empathy. And I think that's a nice distinction too. Do our team members know what's the difference between sympathy versus empathy? And number two, conversations I've started to have with some very respected, in my view, educators, that this type of, or this discussion of conduct and code of conduct is starting to show up in some dental schools and some dental hygiene schools, and having, the incoming class and signing their code of conduct for the first time. And there was a school. Yeah. And so that I found was very interesting as well. So it's starting. So these practitioners, as they're learning, the code of conduct starts when they're in school. And we know we've all had horror stories about, dental school experience and hygiene school experience. But that needs to start to change as well, that we need to have that. I don't have to like you, but I have to, you got to respect the person.
Yeah.
And that's that distinction. I don't have to go and have drinks with you after work, but when I'm working 9 to 5 serving patients, there needs to be a level of respect, because and patients pick it up. I'm sure you've gone into one of your friend's house or gone into a meeting room and you could it's palpable. It's like, something's not right. You could just feel either the tension or the ickiness, and patients feel it. So if you think that you're that much of a good actor and actresses, not really, because it's patients know. And then you line them back and they're a foot from your heart, and you're pounding and you're frustrated and your emotions, and it's just a mess. And then you're wondering why they're saying no to treatment, or they're trying to, they don't want to schedule or get back to you. It's something that they just don't feel right about it. And so they're like, okay, I'll come back and we'll see what happens. So there's a lot of psychology around this.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to tell you that as I was doing a little bit of research on your work and the work that you do for this podcast, especially helping practices with some of these toxic conversations and things like that, I found a very interesting quote that you may have heard it before, but I thought it was very appropriate to share. It was by a man by the name of Warren Buffett. So I don't know if that rings a bell. I'm sure it does for most people.
A little bit.
he's done some things. But this is what he said. You will continue to suffer if you have an emotional reaction to everything that is said to you. True power is sitting back and observing things with logic. True power is restraint. If words control you, that means everyone else can control you. Breathe and allow things to pass. And that, I found that, and I just thought it was so relevant to the work that you're doing, because I think that there are times, as I'm sure Kristine, in your work, that there are performance metrics and there are tactics and processes that you work on with practices. But I'm so happy to hear this work that you're doing, because it's something that gets lost a lot of times, but yet without it, right? Without people being honest about that and really handling those pieces, a practice can crumble from within. And so I thought that was a very interesting quote that would tie on to the work that you do.
Oh, no, I love it. It absolutely. I mean, nothing that happens means anything until we attach a meaning to it. So yeah, absolutely. And as I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm kind of laughing at myself, because if my close friends and family listen to this, they'll probably say, oh yeah, I mean, believe me, I get triggered too. I can go from 0 to 100 in a second. So I'm not saying that I walk on water or I'm perfect all the time, but it's the awareness of it and being ingrained in that relationship, saying, you know what, and going back to that person saying, hey, let's figure out a better way. Or we've been bumping up against this for so long in my practice. I need some help, and who can assist me to have these type of conversations and restructure our, the environment or the day so it doesn't have to keep on repeating itself. Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting. And I'll share a little story about that, is that I think we all, like you said, have had our moments. We've had them in the past. We'll have them in the future. I'll talk about my mother, who is probably the sweetest woman that I know. And it was interesting because as I would share stories about my mother with my wife, and I would share with her when we were kids, and she would, get mad at us or yell at us. And she said, how in the world, I could never see that woman doing that. Well, the fact of the matter is it happens to all of us. And I think the fact that somebody like yourself that has, brought that awareness to, not only about yourself, but then, how it can help others. To me, I think that lends us a sense of credibility to say, hey, listen, we're all in this together. We all have emotions. We can all let things happen to the best of us, but it's how we handle it. And I think the work that you've done to be able to study it, understand it, and most importantly, how to make progress with it is important. So we've all been there. So kudos to you for sharing that. And yes, as your family and friends listen, if we can give them a good chuckle, that's always a good thing, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And the same thing as our patients, right? So our patients aren't the same person 3 months from now than they are today. So if they're walking in your office today and they may say no to treatment, that doesn't mean they're going to say no 3 months from now. So hopefully they've evolved and they've developed, as we all hopefully were evolving and developing and becoming a better self. So that, the person I was in my 20s is different than my 30s, different than my 40s, and I'll just leave it at that. So
yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Well, Kristine, this has been wonderful. I really appreciate you taking time. I know you're very busy and helping people, and want to let everybody know that if you want to learn more about the great work that Kristine's doing and how she's helping dental practices, go ahead and go out to dentalconsultantconnection.com. That's dentalconsultantconnection.com. There's a whole page on Kristine and all the work that she's doing. You can get a hold of her there, as well as all the other great coaches and consultants that are a part of Robin Morrison's team, and she's just doing some great stuff over there at DCC. Also, you can call 727-447-4756, connect with DCC. And as we're going through this podcast series, it's been interesting. I've been thinking back. Today we've got the content that Kristine's been talking about. We talked about marketing. We've talked about OSHA. We've talked about medical billing. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, as we move forward, it's really bringing to light to me the value that DCC can provide to dental practices across the country. So Kristine, it's been a true pleasure. You're doing some great stuff out there, and I really enjoyed spending time with you today.
Well, thank you so much. And you're doing great stuff, and Robin's doing great stuff. And it's nice to be in a community. And I think that's what I love about this, because I know where my strength is. And some of those other, like the OSHA and the medical billing, that's not my wheelhouse. So when you work with clients and you're finding out, okay, I know a great person that can help you with that. That's why this, what Robin's creating is just amazing. So it's abundance mentality, which is really nice.
Absolutely. Well, listen, you have a wonderful week. Safe travels wherever you are, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Kristine. What's going on, everybody? John here. Hope you enjoyed that episode here on the Digital Trade Show Dental Podcast. If you liked the content, liked the guest, and you are looking to add another podcast to your mix of podcasts, just seems like they're growing like crazy, right? Would love to have you visit iTunes and or Google Play and subscribe to the Digital Trade Show Dental Podcast. As I add episodes out there, those will come through on your listening device of choice, and would love to have you become a member. So moving forward, want to let everybody know that very excited to announce that I have taken all of my podcasts, Digital Trade Show Dental, Digital Classroom, the video podcast that I do on Facebook, consolidated everything into a brand new company called DentalCast Productions, doing a lot of the podcasts, also going to be doing live event recording, all kinds of fun things. And we've got a new website, dentalcastproductions.com. That's dentalcastproductions.com. Would love to have you visit the site. That's where you can listen to all the podcasts. We're also starting up a new newsletter. Going to have a lot of great information and content from my guests, and certainly we will only send you stuff if you choose, but I think you'll like it. I think there are a lot of great things that so many of the great companies in dentistry are doing, and would love to have them bend your ear and or your eyes in a newsletter for a small amount of time during the month to share the great things that they're doing. So go ahead and head out to dentalcastproductions.com. You can subscribe to the newsletter really easy, and we really appreciate it. And as always, if you enjoy the podcast, we'd love to have you share it out to all of your other dental colleagues. It is greatly appreciated. And with that, have a wonderful day.